Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's podcast called ThriveCAST. I'm here today with Cheryl Fosdick from CF Design and Loom Studios. Did she go off to college at 15?
I did. Missed my high school graduation.
Oh my gosh. And you were a lab biochemist?
Yeah, in my other life.
But what I think is really impressive is that you were in a 600-person course on ancient architecture history that truly called your name, which set you on the path to storytelling through design.
It absolutely did. I think I had been back in college for about a year and a half, taken everything from art history to archaeology and botany and just about everything. And I was sitting in near the back row of that class, actually, and I instantly thought she was speaking directly to me. And that person became my thesis advisor, and I continued to work with her until she retired a couple of years ago.
It's amazing. What a cool story. So you're originally from Chicago, and now you're rooted in Duluth, Minnesota.
I am.
So why? I mean, I guess you didn't change too far from cold to cold. You went from cold to colder, right? In Duluth.
Yeah, I might argue differently, but it's here. It gets so cold that oftentimes we're right on Lake Superior, and I never lived right on the lake in Chicago, but I was pretty close to the lake. But yeah, in Lake Superior, it freezes. It gets so cold, and when it freezes, the air dries up, and it actually doesn't feel nearly as cold here as it ever did in Chicago for me. So it's a wet cold there.
Yeah, it's a wet cold. I think that's definitely the difference is that when it's a dry cold, it's not quite as bad. I would agree.
That's right.
Yeah. So you're in Duluth, Minnesota, and you have an incredible love for the shoreline and the sky, regardless of where you're working, whether it's in Bayfield or a little remote island on Lake Superior. I mean, it sounds like small towns and big ideas is your unshakable passion.
It is. It was a little difficult moving to Duluth. It's a 85,000 person community, and it's a small town. I can walk into the mayor's office. If I have something to say to the mayor, I can do that. I certainly could not do that in St. Paul when I lived in St. Paul and never in Chicago, but we have a little ancillary office in a little playground location in Bayfield, Wisconsin, where the population is really about 650 people, but it expands quite a bit in the summer with sailing and with all sorts of outdoor activities. There's a little island called Madeline Island off the coast of Bayfield, and we do a lot of work out there, and there may be 150 people, full-time residents out there. But I tell you, most of them come from places like LA and Spokane and, places that we really don't see a lot of people cycling through the remote regions of Wisconsin.
So tell me a little bit about CF Design and Loom Studios. What are you guys all about?
I've had a branch office of a Minneapolis firm up to Duluth. Oh gosh, it's been over 34 years now. And I didn't realize how parochial a place Duluth was, how really separate it was from other parts of the state. And I think at that time it was probably the 5th largest community in the state. And so that lasted about 3 years. But really, to be in Duluth, you have to be born in Duluth to have credibility and trust. And so I started a small firm with another colleague for 3 years that was born in Duluth, and ultimately decided that I wanted to do a little bit different route than that company was on. And so I started my own firm about 27 years ago. And it's been interesting. At that time, I was the only woman practitioner in town, and so going to a job site was a little challenging. And a lot of male contractors, no female contractors at that time, and so overcoming a little bit of the attitude, the lack of trust, and that sort of thing. But I get along with people pretty well, and it didn't take long for people to understand that I was there for everyone's benefit, not just mine, and that I wasn't going to yell at anybody. And so all was good. And at this point, I think we probably have a good dozen female practitioners in town and several female contracting companies. So the world has changed quite a bit in the last almost 30 years now. So we are a residential firm primarily, although with the economy, we've adjusted a little bit. We do a little bit of commercial work now and then, but primarily our clients are our second home, third home clients. Occasionally, in more localized areas, we have first home people who are building for the first time on raw land. So that's an interesting experience to work with people that have never done this before.
And that's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about your design process, because we chatted a little bit about that. And I was so fascinated by the way that you turn design into an activity. So what does that mean to your firm?
Yeah, well, like I said before, we're storytellers. And I think basically all good architecture is about storytelling. It doesn't necessarily tell the same story to everyone, but we're after people's memories, and we're after, what gives them incentive to move from one place to another, and what attracts them, and what makes them safe, and what makes them feel vulnerable, and all sorts of things that are part of the emotional being of having a good piece of architecture around you. We start our projects on site. We will not do a project without an actual building site. We really won't even start a discussion without that, because there's a quality of the site. It has a lot to do with the level of light on the site and how nightfall happens, and what the various physical characteristics are. And they're very dramatic here up north, not so much in the Twin Cities, but we are on a cliff side of Lake Superior. So we have palisades, and we have rock-cut rivers, and we have a lot of really interesting. And on the other side of the lake, where Bayfield exists, is all sand beaches. So we're getting a lot of diversity here. And so we like to talk with people on their site. Sometimes we take these walks at 20 below, and sometimes it's normal. But so we gather everybody together, and we walk, and we talk about why they chose the site. It may be a cultural reason. It may be because of familial context, but we try to get them to tell stories about what they think they will do there. And, we're in the business of accommodation, so we're going to try to make that happen. But we also want them to understand that there are a lot of intangibles when you first start a project, things about light and wind and orientation. And those are hard to talk about in real words because they leave people kind of hanging in midair. So our projects start out very, very real, and we throw everything that we've talked about into a first iteration of a project. And we use that in model form, oftentimes 3D model form, real models, not computer models. And we take them apart.
Wait a minute. So you're not doing 3D? Oh my gosh.
No, we're not.
Look at this.
We're old school.
That is incredible. Nobody does that anymore.
Nobody does it anymore. You're absolutely right. It's pretty old school. And actually, that I do have some younger people working for me who actually can do this as well. But I think for me, these are process models because they go together and they come apart. They get put to the side. Other models get made. We do them in part in sort of small pieces and large pieces. And we model the topography. And just in the process of making, this is all cut with knives. I mean, we don't do any computer cutting of anything. And so in the process of making these models, you actually get a really good intimate sense of where changes occur in the landscape and where sort of different qualities of the site can be understood by just building, literally making with your hands at what the site really is. So these are things that we do on a regular basis, and for every project, virtually, small or large. And 5% maybe of companies out there now still make these models, but we also use them. We have a very long storefront because we have a second portion of my business, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but we have a very long storefront, and we use our tremendous length of windows to showcase all of our models. And so it's, I feel like I'm in a zoo sometimes, but people bring their kids and their family and whatnot, and they hold them up to the models, and they come in, which is really what we want. We want a public studio. So
that's really cool. It's like, it's like an art gallery for architects, right?
It is. It is.
That's so, but it creates some sort of that immersive experience because you talked about kind of that emotional impact between the design of the house and the builder and what that means. Can you talk a little bit about how it helps people feel in the space because you really kind of dig deep into that emotional side? What does that look like?
We do, actually. And a lot of these models they're partial models. And so we put the biggest ideas down on the model, and then we take them to the sites where the sun is really shining in this direction and the views really are in that direction. And a model, even at 1/8 inch scale, if you have a large space, you can actually hold the model at the end of your arm and you can put it in scale with the rest of the landscape and kind of close one eye. But the more important thing is you can look at it and you can see how the sun will come in. You can imagine yourself inside because you can turn and rotate these things with casual abandon. You don't have to wait for a regenerating drawing every time you turn or cut a building in half. It's all there in front of you, and our brains have greater capacity than the computer does to kind of put things together and put ourselves within. We also bring a lot of imagery to the table, and I strongly encourage my clients to tell me equally what they dislike and what they like. And it's difficult for people to understand that criticism in this business is not a pejorative. It's something that we're seeking all the time. And so the hardest thing for people to do is say that they don't like something. So we practice showing them some things we know they don't like and just getting them a comfortable sense of, talking about those things and understanding what's underneath the fact that you don't like something. Sometimes It's just because they haven't seen it or they haven't
Yeah.
experienced it, in which case we may take them to a project we have built. Say, now this is what we're talking about. Now we're in a real space and you can see the scale of it. And so, we're trying always to kind of bounce between real things and imaginary things that could be real. And so, it's a bouncing thing that requires our clients to be interested and to be involved. And it's a little bit different too. A lot of architectural firms will take on what's called a program. Your rooms, the size of your rooms, the height of your rooms, where your rooms are related to other rooms. And we don't really see the program as the thing that generates good architecture. We see the site that does, and we see the stories that come out. And so the program is very malleable. People may think they need 3 bedrooms, but they really might need one sleeping spot and some alcoves for guests, or, a day bed here and there. You have to dig underneath what people believe they're supposed to be telling you as clients and find out what they're really all about. So our processes take over a year usually for a house. So
that's amazing. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, what challenges arise when you're trying to balance like functionality with emotional and aesthetic goals of the project? I mean, I can only imagine what...
We should have degrees in psychology, frankly, because marriage actually causes a lot of the problems. And so you're usually balancing 2 people who are, opposites do attract. And there's actually a good story about that in architecture as well, because, and light put together amount to something more than just dark and light. They actually are additive. And people are like that, too. You have to embrace both sides of the point of view. Some people are stronger than others at saying these things. But we try to point out where contrast exists. We want to hold on to it. We try to make sure that people understand this is a good thing. We don't need to resolve all of your beliefs right here, because there's something else that happens with these contrasts. They get pushed into a new form, which is your house. And I'm the first person to say to my initial clients, I have no idea what I'm going to do for you. I really have no idea, because it's all about the process. It's all about the process of talking it through and trying to find translations and mutations of things that people sometimes disagree on, where they can both live happily ever after with that contrast. So contrast is really a big ingredient.
You really take them on an emotional journey here. I guess this is probably, the most expensive investment in most people's lives, right? And you want it to be perfect.
We do. There's always stresses, and the biggest stress comes not so much in the design process, but at the very first part of construction, where no matter what size your house is, it always looks like you could put maybe 3 pairs of shoes in the foundation and you'd be perfectly fine with it. It's just so small. Scale changes rapidly between the phases. So you get into studs and framing, and it looks like you've built nothing but a maze, and you can't even fit your body in. Sheetrock goes in, and then it's much bigger. And so there's this, you have to really watch the emotional swings because people can get stuck in, I've made this horrible mistake notion. And a month later, they're perfectly happy. So the idea is really, we do spend a lot of time on our building sites, and we try to be there with our clients so that we can talk through what's going to happen next. And, that's usually the biggest part of the process that actually causes the most stress, is actually building and then watching the money go out the door. But,
yeah. Right. Your contingency fund is slowly but surely eating away, because that always happens, right? It's kind of inevitable. So another quick question, because the country is really a melting pot of cultural and regional influences. And, in the region where you're designing, is there any sort of cultural or regional influences that really shape the impact of your architectural design?
Yes, there are. Funny enough, my cultural background is not necessarily what the majority of culture backgrounds are here. You absorb these things over time, and we are very rooted in the shipping industry here in Duluth. We're most of the people who have handled and managed the shipping industry have been Danish. And so there's a good Dane population in town. And then the Scandinavian population is probably the largest. A lot of Finnish people, a lot of Swedes and Norwegians. It's actually it's an interesting group of people. There's quite a few Italians in town. A lot of it came from the initial investment in the town. Duluth was planned to be as big as Chicago. In fact, it was laid out on the landscape, which is a very rough terrain, in a grid system that goes well beyond where the city has grown right now. And at one point, Duluth, Minnesota had the most millionaires in the country living here. I know, it's astonishing. But time being what time is and distance being what distance is. Things didn't quite work out, but there were a lot of immigrants that came to this area for work, especially on the railroads and in the forestry services. So one of the things that does with our business is it kind of takes this simple, the quality of simplicity is better understood by people who come from like Scandinavian kind of conservative countries. They understand that things are always complex at some point. They're always usually right in the beginning of discussing something or learning something or education or whatever. It's always complex and difficult, but that over time, when you take things apart and you remove the things that are less important, you have in the end something very simple and elegant. And that's the blessing of the Scandinavian background. Is simple elegance is actually part of their culture and it's part of their expectation in the world. And so in America, we have a tendency to reach to McDonald's as the example of the bigger, better thing, the supersize and all the accoutrements and, everything on there. And we don't suffer from that here, which I think is a very, very nice thing. And it also, the whole idea of daylight is part of the Scandinavian and basically upper European communities. There's not a lot of it in many cases. And a lot of towns in Northern Europe are built on the sea where there's a lot of fog and it's kind of gray. We have very similar conditions here. And so I think there's some familiarity here, but it also, there's a yearning for daylight and kind of shadowless light, which is very democratic. And the colors they can be vibrant, but they're very sparingly used. And I appreciate a lot of that, especially as a modernist. We don't do a lot of houses that are separate rooms with hallways and things like that. We do a lot of houses where spaces blend together and form larger kind of layers of space, which is a very European way of thinking about the land as well, especially a modernist's way of thinking about the land. You sort of build up layers, and some of those layers include the outdoors and even beyond the outdoors, but they're still part of your livable space. So it's a nice attitude to be born into, so to speak.
Right? I love that. And if for those that have kind of that inspiration, especially if they have that cultural heritage that really defines what that landscape is, it's just a nice merriment. It's really important, I think, because in architecture and engineering, AEC firms are kind of like the nucleus, right, of any town. And that nucleus or that seed that's going to grow that flower needs to be nurtured and to help define what that culture and what that feel of that town is. Do you think that any of the homes and the buildings that you have built have helped define, that culture of the town that you reside in?
I think so. I think they have. When we started out doing more of our publishable work in Duluth, it was in my second iteration, which was Cheryl Fosdick, which was a small firm with just 2 people. And the end result of that little 2.5-year foray was the biggest state park, a building in the northern part of the region. And it's also the gateway park for Minnesota. We did a very nice project there that was very simple and very open plan and very unexpected in many ways. And that kind of led to more people asking about, I guess we can use a lot of glass and what happens when we have these gigantic overhangs and what happens when you want to be outside as much as you want to be inside, which is a sort of moniker of a state park. And they brought that to their home. So that project actually begat a lot of local projects with a similar mindset. And then we have been published a lot, and in part it's because we haven't been published a lot up here for a long time, and now the opportunity has been here. So for the last 30 years, there's been a lot more viewability of the northern part of the state. And our sites are so extraordinary here compared to many cities. Sometimes they're acreages. Sometimes they are just so convoluted and so rich with references that I think it's fun for people to even look to see what we could possibly do up here with some of the challenging things we have. We have rock within inches of the soil here in this town. So it's very difficult at times to build, but we try to sit lightly on those lands. And we try to actually make as much of our stories. I write a lot of advertorials, which are topical, and we kind of bring forward the idea of, let's say, open plans or high daylighting or headerless windows, or things that people can actually relate to when they're looking at their projects. And then, of course, we have Loom Studio, our lighting studio, which is that's the way to get people in the door that don't even really know we're an architectural firm, but have this inkling that there's something different going on here than has ever happened in Duluth, and it certainly is Loom Studio.
Let's talk about that, because Loom Studio, I love this. and you have a storefront studio. Tell me how this came to light and how it plays into your architecture firm as
Yep.
far as, the bigger business is concerned.
Yeah. Well, I have had my entire career a lighting fetish. And so I've been very attuned to what companies, fabricators, and designers throughout the world have been doing with lighting over the last 35, 40 years, since school, actually. And when we were forced to move into the space that we're in now because we were evicted from a spot we were in for 27 years when a developer took the building and made it into a dentist's office. So we had to move very quickly, and I had raw space to build with. And so I built out my space. And just as I'm trying to figure out how to get a door onto the sidewalk, which we required double airlock, double doors here, swinging in, so you're taking more space, it was $110,000. And I thought, well, geez, I can look about 45 feet across the front of my office to a lobby across an unused space. This is the time. We decided that we would build out Loom Studio, which is actually it's an experiment. I don't think there's a precedent in this country, actually, for architectural firms to actually have a showroom and to procure products for the general public and for their clients. But we use it as an educational space as well. And we also host a lot of our Arts District businesses here for their various meetings and whatnot. The lighting's great. And we also populated the furniture very nicely with some Miller Knoll Consortium furniture, and we took on a little company in Portugal called Branca Lisboa, which is rooted in Danish modern furniture design. And so we have a little bit of furniture sales. But the big issue is that for many, many years in the last, well, let's say 4 years, when the cost of construction has skyrocketed, it's gone up probably 40% in this region, which is very hard to tell people. And it's hard for them to believe. So by the time we get to the end of these projects and the bids are in and we've all agreed that everything's just fine, people get worried. And one of the first things that falls out of our projects is actually lighting. And sometimes it's actually some of the things that we build in order to create better daylight conditions. Two things that we literally start our design process with come out at the end, which is heartbreaking for me.
Aww.
And so we decided that we would essentially guilt people on the way in and guilt them on the way out. But we have this studio as our entry, and it's a 1,500 square foot space with very nice lighting displays, spaced far apart so you're not hitting your forehead on a light every time you turn around, with some nice seating and a very, very large television that tells the stories of each of the lights that we have on display. And we encourage people to just come with a cup of coffee and a book. And that does happen. We have people that just kind of stop over during their lunch hour to sit and enjoy the space. So it's important that we have this because we need a better cultural understanding of light. And like I say, there's a lot of the Scandinavian people kind of come at this naturally, but not everyone does. And
Right.
I think we're missing so many opportunities when we toss that possibility out the door, and especially if we don't start with those ideas. So we're here to more educate people than anything, and we do get a lot of walk-ins from the street. So I'm happy about that. We're starting to get some more sales. We've been open about 16 months now, and it's a long time to get your name out, but I'm starting to hear people saying it. So I'm happy about that.
That's good. That's good. So, speaking of, kind of branding and what it is that you're doing to spread the awareness of your firm, can you talk a little bit about the emotional impacts of working on smaller scale projects or in those really tight-knit communities versus some of those larger urban developments, because you're kind of the poster child for some of these really great tight-knit community projects. What is that like?
Yes, it's been interesting. Again, in the last, COVID has changed the world for us.
Oh,
And I think for a lot of small firms, they never made it out of COVID. And we were lucky we hung on with our fingernails for this. And I'm a person who lived through 9/11 as a company when I was trapped in Denver for 10 days. And when I got back, I had 0 clients. They had all stopped exactly everything. And then also the recession, when I actually opened my ancillary office in Bayfield against the better judgment of just about every human being on earth. But I thought, well, here's an opportunity. So I did it at the bottom of the economy. And now this. And so this is almost a strike 3 for me. But what has happened is that we've had to change the way we think about small projects. We used to and always hoped that people would hire us and they would be dedicated to the process and they would continue to follow through and we would give them plenty of time to think, but there would be an end date. Now we have balls in the air, lots and lots of balls in the air, and we're juggling projects every day, literally every day. I don't know whether I have a mobile project going forward or whether it's going to be held for a week or a month or a year. And it's particularly difficult now with politics being so imbalanced as well. So I feel like, it's a mystery to me how we actually work every day, but we're doing it. As long as we show up, we get the work. And for small projects in small towns, most of these people that we're working with know each other. And so turns out, there's some commodity of scale when it comes to purchasing product, and that can be extended to other people in town. But there's also some commodity of discussion, let's say, because people talk amongst themselves. And when we have our discussions with these people, we hear common ground statements from people who know each other in this town and have a similar position about how they think about things. And so it's a process of education. When you have so many balls in the air, you're exposed to these things on a regular basis instead of one project at a time. It has been different for me. And, I'm 65 years old now, and multitasking is not my forte, but I have learned to do it. And, more importantly, I think from my generation, we finish things when we start them, but they may be 3 or 4 or 5 years from when we started. And that is entirely new thing. I like also to think a lot about housing in this town, because single family homes are almost not affordable to people anymore. With the percentages you have to have down and the cost for construction. So we need some new models. And I do not believe in the tiny house model. I think that's an absurd model. But I do believe in a low-rise, high-density housing. And we don't have any of that really to speak of in Duluth that has any contemporary quality at all. So I've been pushing hard to promote some new thinking. It is actually more of a European type thinking, but because we have a lot of young professionals who want to come here, and thank you, New York Times and Outside Magazine, for calling us one of the most climate stable cities in the country. We have a lot of people moving here sight unseen from places like Napa Valley when it was smoky there, and I fully expect LA. Because we've been touted as a very fine place to live, which is indeed true. But where are they going to live? So, and we have a very big medical community here. Just had $1 billion investment in a new campus happen, and we have 3 colleges. So it is chasing down your house day here in Duluth most of the time.
How do people do it? Like
Don't
in a
know.
smaller town like that with like so much populace and so much growth? Like you can't, building a house there's not an overnight thing, right?
No, there's not much property, and there are not that many builders, and you have to be patient. And I think the bigger issue is that, development tends to be the champion that's put forward. Developers are the champions put forward in communities to build more condos and more high rises, and so that people can have their space to be. And I think, obviously those are some of the only people that can afford to do these things too. But there needs to be, I think, some different thinking about cooperative housing as well, so that people, they can put money down on shares, but maybe not $80,000 of cash down on a new house. It's kind of crazy. I think, I'm happy to see we do have some larger buildings coming to town. There's a 14-story one going on across the street right now, all apartments. But we do need some more walkable, scalable little communities for people with small children and young professionals. So I'm doing what I can. My mouth is running all the time about these things, so I try.
So what do you think, based on your firm, what do you think is your biggest differentiator in comparison to maybe some of your competitors being a smaller boutique style firm? What makes you guys stand out the most?
Well, clearly the imagery that we have out in the world stands out. Every project we have is form fit to the site and to the client. And there's no question that these pieces are unique. And so first, it's actually just the visual attraction. But I also think it's when I have people call me or email me to sit down and talk, I let them know right away that we have a first time meeting at no cost and no obligation. And it could be up to 4 or 5 hours long. And that I would prefer to do that with a meeting on their site, or at least a visit to their site. So, it can be an all-day affair for me. I think that's very, very helpful for people to actually have enough time to get comfortable with you, where you can have a conversation that is a little deeper than this is how much money I have and when I have to get it done. So we do that. And I also respond in a lengthy manner to people who would call me or get a hold of me by email with all sorts of discussion about the state of construction industry, the state of the design industry, costs of materials, availability of product, so that when they finally decide if they're going to come and speak to me, that we're more or less on the same footing. So We work very hard to educate. I would say that all of us in this office probably spend almost 20% of the time that I'm paying them and myself educating people at no fee. But I think it's really important.
Well, and I think that that's such a huge differentiator because in this day and age, everything's so transactional, right? And so when you can foster that personal and professional development to really build that trust, you're not only building a lifelong customer, but you're building someone who's going to be able to push your good name forward somewhere
Yep.
else.
Yep.
And it spans the goodness of what good customer service really means. And good customer service in 2025 is very hard to come by.
It is. It's a very rare.
Like, I would consider that a superpower, if you can do that and really foster those relationships. I'm sure that you get a lot of referrals based on that.
More than half of our work comes from referrals, and I would say a good 20% of that are second and third projects we're doing for the same people. So yes, it does help. And when you're in a town that has a big medical industry, of course, all those departmental people talk together. So we do a lot of work for gastroenterologists. I don't know why, but they just seem to talk to each other, and I'm happy for that. So. It's and our work over in Bayfield and on the lake is probably tied together more by people who sail than anything else. And I'm a sailor, and so we just chat amongst ourselves, and word gets out. So
that's amazing. So from as an AEC professional and architect, what do you think in 2025 is going to be the biggest hurdle for you to overcome in your business? What do you think is going to be the hardest thing for you to overcome this year?
Yeah, I think it's credibility. And, we tell people right off the bat that, we can't do a project that has durability and longevity. I don't care what size it is, for anything less than about $550 a square foot, which is shocking given the fact that 4 years ago in this area, it was closer to $350 a square foot. And it is always possible to go out and find a contractor who will say the opposite of that, who will say, I can do it for $200 or $300 a square foot. People want to hear what they want to hear. And,
of course.
As honest and as, clear as I try to be with people, I always come away feeling that they think I'm trying to mess with them, that I'm trying to overstate our costs, and that I want to spend their money more than I should have to spend their money. But it's been very hard to bring people up into the real world. And so that's been the hardest thing. And I also think that, the pending potential, tariffs and things like that, we've had this happen once before. And when wood tariffs going on wood from Canada, which is just up the road from us, we are hurt by that. Our projects stop sometimes. They become unaffordable to our clients, which means we don't work. So there's all this stuff that's happening. And I think those are some of the things that are slated to happen this year, make me extremely nervous. And overcoming those will be pretty interesting. I really don't know how we're going to do it, but it just seems like we do it. We get up every day and we just do it.
It's amazing how resilient we are, right? As a species.
Yeah.
We really are able to bounce back. But I wanted to touch upon, some of the competitors that say, oh, I can do it for $200 a square foot. And the gaslighting that's going on, that just puts the smoke and mirrors over a person's eyes.
Yep.
Have you ever had an experience where they're like, yeah, I'm going to go with that $200 square foot, and then come back to you crawling going, I made a huge mistake. What did I do?
Yeah, we're still waiting for people to come crawling back. I do know that because again, we're in a small town, so you can hear a little bit of the chit chat out there, but I do know that people have been very unhappy making decisions based upon lowest possible price. It's one of the reasons we actually don't bid our projects out. I mean, maybe 2% of the time we do. Most of the time we convince our clients to go talk to the contractor, find how comfortable you are, understand if they know what a change order is, how do they run their business. Well, I'll look at their work. Make your decision based upon what you actually see and not what you hear. So we also, we're right on the edge of a very rural part of the state. A good 150 miles to Canada from here is small contractors who probably grew up in that area, whose fathers probably were contractors, who probably passed their contractor's license, but are not highly educated about new theories about things and new materials. And I've been told many times by contractors, we don't have codes up here. And I assure you, you do.
You do?
But, oh yes, you absolutely do. But they'll tell their clients that. And so, well, we can cut that corner, we can cut this corner, and it happens. And, there's nothing really I can do about it other than to continually warn them. So it's, we like to have our clients talk to a number of contractors early on so that they can understand that they're all over the place when it comes to assurances. And it's pretty easy once you've talked to 4 or 5 contractors to understand those that are durable and whose businesses have thrived. They do it on the basis of honesty. And so, we have to all work together. This profession is a profession that is not always liked very much by contractors. And some of it has to do with the independent nature of the 50s and 60s and the starchitect and, the overwhelming architect that runs everything and gall darn it, it's going to be my way. But we don't operate that way anymore. We need contractors to work with us, and we learn a great deal from contractors on sites, which is why we spend so much time on the site. So it's, I'm maybe perhaps more active trying to talk to people who don't like me than talk to people who do. Yeah. So, I was on a job site just a small story. I was on a job site last year, and I heard this guy talking about the bee who had designed this project, and who in the hell was this bee? And I was standing right behind him, and I kind of tapped him on the shoulder, and I said, I'm the bee. And he just, okay then, well, let's get to work here, So it wasn't like, I'm sorry, or I might have misspoken, or I don't even know you. But, it's just, that's the way it works sometimes. But I can see the humor in it, and I don't like it, but I can certainly see the humor in it. And I just I push back as much as I get pushed on.
Yeah, you do have to grow some thick skin in marketing as well. You have to have really thick skin because everybody has an opinion. Everybody, thinks that they can do it better. Everybody thinks that, there's always a better way of going about it. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, I can hear what you have to say, but, you don't have the 25 years of experience in this.
Exactly.
So I'm going to go ahead and let you, toot your horn, and then we're going to get back to square one, right?
Exactly.
That's just how
I always
it goes.
tell my younger employees, and we have occasionally students that work here in the summer, that, if you don't think that you're the authority in the room when you walk in the room, why are you in the room? And authority doesn't mean that you are the only one speaking. Authority means that you're listening. And you're doing it for a reason. It's, a lot of people, they're just kind of nervous about the way things are going to go, but this is such a weird profession because you learn it by continually practicing something over and over again until you get really good at it. And you're not really good at it when you're a young person yet, but you can't get good at it unless you think you will be. It's kind of like, what is the...
Catch-22.
Yeah, it is. I forget, what is the play with the flying person that, he comes in your dreams. And anyway, the statement was always, you'll never fly. You'll never fly unless you think you can. So...
I love
True.
that. Is that Peter Pan?
Peter Pan. Got it.
Peter Pan.
Yep.
Yeah, when you said that, I was like, oh, I see Robin Williams in Hook. So one other question that I have for you is, how do you think zoning laws, because you had said there's not a lot of regulation, and local regulations really impact that rural architectural project and design? Do you guys have major hurdles? Like, for instance, in Los Angeles, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And being able to get anything done is really hard. Do you guys, experience that same type of thing?
Well, we have a much more rigorous codes review process here than we had when I first came here 30 years ago. I believe there were maybe 3 or 4 people in the Office of Building Inspection, and now there are maybe 35 or 40. And they work with planning and zoning quite a bit. And there's processes that become more and more dense all the time about how to get information from people and how to set up meetings. And it's very laborious, more so than it needs to be for a community this size. But the thing that bothers me the most is the inability for these organizations to change very quickly. And things do change quickly. An example would be an accessory dwelling, for instance, where that's one of the ways we can try to solve some of our housing problems, is to allow people to build a rentable property on their property. And most properties are, pretty similar. They're 100 feet deep and 40 feet wide. And okay, so there are rules that say that these pieces have to be in the backs of houses. They can't be in between the sidewalk and the house. That makes good sense. But we have a lot of properties here because of our topography, because of our shoreline, that are extremely deep properties. And I'll tell you, most people will build on the back of those properties because they're close to the lake and the view, and that leaves very little space behind a building to build another building in the absolutely prime location to be an ancillary dwelling. So the rules have to change to allow those to move forward between the street and the house. And it is moving like molasses to get to that point. And the opportunities are many because those deep lots are also owned by people who have the money to do these kind of projects well.
Right.
So it's ironic that it's just immobile. I mean, it can talk till the day cows come home, and you can try for a variance, but no, we don't grant those variances that way. And it's like, we just have to wait and see. And there are also, downtown requirements that strive, I think, for some consistency in a downtown. And I'm the last person to look for that. I don't like symmetry. I like imbalance. And for lots of reasons I think we've discussed, but it drives me nuts when you have a formula for how to build a tall building where in every 30 feet it has to move out 3 feet or in 3 feet or out 3 feet. That's not character. I feel like we're building maybe a Hollywood set or something here, but
yeah, it's cookie cutter.
It's cookie cutter. Yeah,
it's like a Lego set, and I mean, Lego sets can you can get really unique if you let it, right?
Well, I've always said they have a certain amount of light glass that they want on the street level in the downtown area, and blah blah blah. And I said, well, some buildings which are massive, we have some massive buildings here that are massive, but they don't really have large windows. And in many ways, the stonework is actually more interesting. So why can't we have a facade that has no windows on the street level, but might have a little bit of water flowing down the wall into a little trench at the bottom, and maybe a little bit of greenery growing in the summertime, and in the winter, a little piece of ice that's lit from below at the bottom? Why can't we do something like that? I mean, why not? It's an experience, but it's like, because that doesn't fall into the category of windows on the wall. So it's a little bit frustrating, and I feel like sometimes planners, they're trying to protect the world from architects, and that feels bad. But I know there have been some times in history, 1958 Duluth, when lava rock was big, and it happened. Maybe we did need to be protected, but it's always like that. So.
That's so funny. Do you think that your architectural design adapts to specific lifestyles of the people that you're building for? Someone who's kind of started from more humble beginnings but still has, the capital to be able to build. Their design aesthetic is grossly different than, the very successful plastic surgeon who, wants very modern. I mean, do you think that in a place in a city like yours that's a little bit smaller, do you think you still have that, or is it kind of? I
think we do, and I think part of the reason that works is that we have an idea about sustainability that is a little bit different than I think maybe some people would think. Okay, we're going to use glass that's recycled and steel that's recycled, and whatever. We're not going to ship things from very far, which is also a good idea. But our idea is that we do it once and it doesn't have to be done again. People are not as fickle as we may think they are. When you interview somebody over the course of a year to do a home for them, they are telling you who they are. They are exposing who they are. And very rarely do people shift greatly in their kind of personality, in their own personal culture, in their familial understandings. They just don't shift a lot. So if you provide someone something at a moderate income that they could later afford to spend more money on, we hope they don't. We hope that they actually learn to live with what they have, that they are so captivated by it that there isn't another way to do better. And when we have clients that have more money that come to us, we still use the same notions of let's build smaller, let's build more durably, let's include the outside with our inside spaces and try to understand our site from edge to edge, top to bottom in the process of living in it. We don't use any different rules. And trend, to me, is an enemy of that. So we try to stay away from, my neighbor did it, so I need to do it. And, my first question is, well, why? Why?
Yeah, so, there's exactly. If my neighbor did it, I want to do exactly the opposite.
Or more. Yeah, exactly.
Or
right,
more.
Exactly. Right, or more.
Or do something totally different.
Yeah.
How, for your firm, what is the one or two major takeaways that you really want to make sure that we leave, this discussion with, just to have in people's minds where you are and what you truly believe in. What are those
Yep.
takeaways?
Well, I would say that we are very beholden to building sites, and I don't believe that there is a great piece of architecture out there that doesn't also have a great site. Whether the site has been manipulated to get there in cohesion with the building, or whether it has been absorbed or embedded in the building's kind of culture and qualities. You have to think of those things as inseparable on some level. And so we do that. And I think our work shows that we do that. We're also happy people and we have a good life, and we're not out here to make a ton of money, but we live in a very extraordinary place with extraordinary light and sky. And we hope everybody that comes to us is either curious about what is it about that is so special, because we can show them, or we think so too. And so there's some common ground here. These people understand us and they appreciate the same things we appreciate. I'm also a big volunteer, so I spend a lot of my time volunteering for big events in Duluth, like Grandma's Marathon, which just moved into the 10th largest marathon in the country spot. And so it's important to kind of get out and have your neighbors see you and things like that. And I think that's one thing we do very well also, is we integrate with other people. We just are happy to hear stories. And,
I love that.
Yeah, we're just people.
I mean, and, people like rational-minded people that, you can really find some sort of relation to, which is amazing. And again, in this day and age, that's kind of hard to come by.
It is.
I mean, I know it seems like such a simple concept, but it just has been increasingly difficult. Your process, I believe, is super unique in the way that you really your design and, make sure that it complements, the land, and making sure that the land really dictates to you what's capable, instead of forcing that land to be something that it's not. And again,
That's
I
right.
use Los Angeles as an example, because they're always forcing that land to be something that it's probably not meant to be.
Yep.
So
That's right.
I just love that your preparation and your process is super organic, and it makes you very different.
Yeah,
I think.
And it's, our clients, they pick these sites for a reason, and they may not even know why, but it's our job to kind of find the common ground there between them, their site, the qualities of the site that they may or may not have seen but feel. And so that's where we start to put that knot together, is right there. And I think once people understand that we can see things that they see, and we can see things that they want to see and help them see those things, I think it's a pretty fair and pretty comfortable process to go through. We do not rush people. We encourage them to stop and think and just let us know, so we don't work beyond the point where they need to gestate some ideas. But we encourage that, actually, and that's also kind of different, because the bottom line doesn't like that very much in a business. But in a world where you're throwing another ball in the air, is just another ball in the air, so
Right.
Juggling is just fine. That's the way it works these days. So
Cheryl Fosdick, I love chatting with you from CF Design in Duluth, Minnesota. We'll add your website and your contact information, but I want to thank you for your time today.
absolutely, it's a pleasure.
It was a joy speaking with you. You just have a lot of great ideas. So,
and you as well. It's very fun to talk about why we do this. So.
Yeah, I just think you resonate the passion that every architect should really have. And so, people could take a learning lesson from you, because trust me when I say not all architects are like you.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Well, I have a good life, and this has given it to me. So I'm very grateful for the profession as well.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for joining me today.
You're very welcome.